Hello friends, and this is 3 a.m. Europe. Wow, the day that we knew would come, that day had indeed come. I am of course speaking about the terrorist attack that took place in Paris last Friday. And as I'm speaking, and as we are recording this clip, I am still in shock, as most of the people are, that people are capable of performing such a cold-blooded, heinous, evil deed of this caliber is just unbelievable. At the moment, the facts that we have is at least 140 people are dead, 99 are in very critical condition, and even more people are seriously injured. The terror organization ISIS has taken responsibility for carrying out this act of terror, and Europe is never the same now as it was before. However, in this clip, I don't want to focus on what has happened because that is pretty obvious. What is not obvious, though, and is rather ambiguous, is the future and the consequences that this may bring. So let us take a look at what we can expect and what may happen in the near future because of the consequences of the attack in Paris. Now, what we have heard so far and what we will hear even more now is that in order to protect the safety and the security of the people, governments will argue for the necessity for more surveillance. We are told that more surveillance will make us safer, and if we are too protective and too concerned with our private lives, then we will not be able to catch the bad guys. Now, this might seem to be a logical argument, but actually, if you go and study it and research it, it is actually not. You see, in order to monitor every piece of communication will only reduce hopes of preventing future attacks, says not only me, but also, and even more importantly, former FBI Special Agent Colleen Rowley, who was a Time Magazine Person of the Year, who argues that mass surveillance makes preventing terrorism and catching bad guys less likely, not more likely. He also said that discovering people through surveillance who were preparing for a terrorist act is like finding a needle in a haystack. And if it is difficult to find a needle in a haystack, why should we add more hay to it? Rowley continues to say that I fear that terrorists will succeed in carrying out future attacks, not despite the massive collected awe, dragnet approach to intelligence implemented since 9/11, but because of it. The approach has made terrorist activity more difficult to spot and prevent. Fascinating, and Rowley explains that the CIA had only about 16 names on a terrorist watch list back in September 2001, and probably most were justified, but there's no way the million names reportedly now on the terrorist identities data marked environment list can be very accurate. The decision to elevate quantity over quality did nothing to increase accuracy, unblock intelligence stovepipes, or prevent terrorist attacks. So I mean, to politicize such an horrific event and claim that these terrorist attacks could have been prevented and can be prevented in the future only if we increase more surveillance is grounded in mere political fantasy and ideological fantasy than mere fact and data which has been shown. Accordingly, the UK government with Theresa May has launched a very forceful surveillance program that does not only focus on violent extremists but also on non-violent extremists. Now I'm actually researching this program which she has launched and the different legislations for my essay. And one of the questions that I have raised is, all right, but how do you define extremism? Who is an extremist? Because in the 30s it was the Nazis, in the 60s it was the communists, now it's Islamic fundamentalists and terrorists, but non-violent extremists? Non-violent extremists are part of a national threat, and a non-violent can be anybody. Could I be a non-violent extremist simply because I'm making clips like this, calling for people to think for themselves, and that the present counter-terrorism initiatives by the West, the counter-justice model and the war model, that they are simply not working, but they are creating and fueling extremism? Could you be a non-violent extremist simply for watching a clip like this? So pay very close attention to increased surveillance and limited free speech here in the West due to the attacks in Paris. And you know what? You know what is so funny about this? While governments are trying to counter domestic terrorism, in other words, they are trying to fight against terrorism that is growing within their particular country, it is actually now a fact that the West and the allies of the United States, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates are financially sponsoring the same people, the people in ISIS, whom the same governments claim that we need to be afraid of. Take a look at this clip.
So you're in a little bit of a dilemma on that. We need to leave that kind of fuzzy on this, but we need the authorization to follow the leads, put the troops in, and play this. Look, ISIS got started through funding from our friends and allies, because as people will tell you in the region, if you want somebody who will fight to the death against Hezbollah, you don't put out a recruiting poster and say, you know, sign up for us, we're going to make a better world. You go after zealots, and you go after these religious fundamentalists. That's who fights Hezbollah.
At the White House, President Obama welcomed the Emir of Qatar.
We had a significant meeting of the minds. We are both committed to making sure that ISIL is defeated.
Well, committed and meeting of the minds isn't exactly a view shared by everyone. According to reports, Qatar is now the biggest source of private funding for ISIS. At the same time that it's home to a key U.S. airbase for launching airstrikes against the terrorists. Qatar's state-endorsed main mosque has hosted a steady string of clerics preaching hate, including prayers to destroy all Jews. When Egypt started bombing ISIS in Libya this month, Qatar opposed it. Accurate numbers are hard to come by on how much money flows from wealthy donors to ISIS, thought to be significant, though only a part of ISIS's total daily haul of around $1 million.
Do you acknowledge that Qatar has been a significant source of especially private donations to ISIS and other terrorist groups?
Well, Michelle, what we acknowledge is that there are areas where we disagree with the Qataris, but more often we find that our interests overlap.
So can you say whether pressure is on them now to stop that financing?
We do believe that there is more that they can do and more that we can do together to shut down the financing of terror operations around the globe.
Based on our data, I provided examples of the financing of different Islamic State units in different countries by private individuals. Financing, as we have established, comes from 40 countries, and there are some of the G20 states among them.
Now, have you ever wondered how ISIS is able to put up a fight against the attacks from the West? Have you ever wondered why they are able to get oil from the oil fields in Iraq and they are able to sell it? Have you not wondered why these oil fields have not been bombed yet? Let me remind you, the war between Syria and ISIS and the civil war and all of it has taken place for almost 2 years. Either the West has made a military blunder in not discovering these oil fields yet, or they know exactly what is happening and have purposefully let them be there for the sake of ISIS so that they can grow and they can perform that which the US so deeply wants, get rid of President Assad. And now, having mentioned Assad, have you ever wondered why somebody like Assad would be attacked? They were successful with Gaddafi. They were successful with Saddam Hussein. Now, I'm not saying that Gaddafi and the other guy, Saddam Hussein, were like saints. Far from it. But as retired General Wesley says, the U.S. government had already decided that these countries would be taken out. And we are seeing this at the moment. Take a look at this clip.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me, and one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda? He said, no. He says, there's nothing new that way. They've just made the decision to go to war with Iraq. He said, I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments. And he said, I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, are we still going to war with Iraq? And he said, oh, it's worse than that. He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs, meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, this is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran.
So according to General Wesley, there are countries that are needed to be taken out, but the question is how? Hillary Clinton admitted this. Take a look.
We also have a history of kind of moving in and out of Pakistan. I mean, let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded 20 years ago. And we did it because we were locked in this struggle with the Soviet Union. They invaded Afghanistan, and we did not want to see them control Central Asia, and we went to work. And it was President Reagan, in partnership with the Congress, led by Democrats, who said, you know what, sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's deal with the ISI and the Pakistani military, and let's go recruit these mujahideen, and let's get some to come from Saudi Arabia and other places, importing their Wahhabi brand of Islam so that we can go beat the Soviet Union. And guess what? They retreated. They lost billions of dollars, and it led to the collapse of the Soviet Union. So there's a very strong argument, which is, wasn't a bad investment to end the Soviet Union, but let's be careful what we sow because we will harvest. So we then left Pakistan. We said, okay, fine, you deal with the stingers that we've left all over your country. You deal with the mines that are along the border. And by the way, we don't want to have anything to do with you. In fact, we're sanctioning you. So we stopped dealing with the Pakistani military and with ISI, and we now are making up for a lot of lost time.
Hillary Clinton actually admitted that the US created Al-Qaeda. But if Al-Qaeda has been created by the US, what do you think of ISIS? Well, while ISIS is definitely without a shadow of doubt being financially sponsored in order to get rid of Assad in Syria, I have found a document which I don't believe many people have seen it yet. And I am wondering why this has not been major news in the media. Because a revealing light on the West's involvement with ISIS is shown by a recently declassified secret US intelligence report written in August 2012, and let me remind you, this was years before ISIS came onto the world stage. I'm going to show you now some screenshots from the document, and they are going to shock you because they shocked me. So first of all, speaking about the general situation, they point out in point A that internally events are taking a clear sectarian direction. What is that? Point B. The Salafists, who are the Salafists? The Salafists are those who are trying to perpetrate a violent jihadism. They are trying to get in the Sharia law and the Caliphate. Alright, so the Salafists and the Wahhabists, they are both the same thing basically. The Muslim Brotherhood and the AQI, the Al-Qaeda in Iraq, are the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. So why is this important? Well, it shows that extreme Muslim terrorists, Salafist, Muslim Brotherhood, and the AQI have always been, quote, the major forces driving the insurgency in Syria. So the question is, are there any moderate rebels? Yes or no? Obviously not. So who are the ones that are supporting these rebels? We got the answer clearly in point C. It says that the West, who are the West? Well, the United States of America, United Kingdom, France, France, Germany, and all of these countries, Gulf countries, and Turkey support the opposition. Who are the opposition? It is the major forces that are driving the insurgency in Syria. It's the Muslim extremists, while Russia, China, and Iran support the regime. Isn't that fascinating? The West is sponsoring financially, admitted in the document, but also militarily, these Muslim extremists, including ISIS. And the document even states the future assumption of the crisis being that the regime will survive and have control over Syrian territory. Do you get that? This document, having been written in August 2012, said that the regime in Syria will not fall. Yet the West is doing everything to overthrow Assad, and now with Russia bombing ISIS down there, everything can go so wrong. And on the last page, almost as a conclusion of it, everything that we have now spoken of, comes the effects of what Iraq has. Now the document says in point C that if the situation unravels, there is the possibility of establishing a declared or undeclared Salafist principality. Do you get that? Salafist principality. What is that? That is the caliphate. That is jihadism, enforcing Sharia law, a reign of terror for those who are not practicing the Islam. And this is basically an attack upon Christianity, upon all other religions which were based in Syria. And this is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want in order to isolate the Syrian regime. And then, as you can see down, speaking about ISIS in yellow, it says that ISIS could also declare an Islamic state through its union with other terrorist organizations in Iraq and Syria. So Sharia law and a caliphate can be accomplished. And do you remember what we read? This is exactly what the supporting powers to the opposition want. In other words, the powers supporting the Syrian opposition, the West, our Gulf allies in Turkey, wanted to have an Islamic caliphate in order to challenge the Syrian president Assad. But the declassified documents show that the US and the West supported ISIS at its inception. Written in 2012, ISIS came along slowly around, became a world power around 2013. And this was a way to isolate the Syrian government. So no wonder we should not be surprised when President Obama is military sponsoring these terrorists by dropping 50 tons of ammunition last month to give to the so-called rebels. But hey, I have news for you. These rebels are the ones that are fighting against Assad. And who are fighting against Assad? It is ISIS. And this drop of ammunition happened exactly when Russia had decided that they are going to bomb ISIS. These people truly want war. You see, there is in philosophy something that's called Hegelian Dialectic thinking. You create the thesis, but at the same time you also create the antithesis. And these two are completely different from each other. You rub the two together, thesis and antithesis, until you have the synthesis, the result which you wanted to have since the very beginning. So it works like this in the practice. This is the theory, this is the practice, and then we're going to come to reality. Point number one, the government creates or exploits a problem that then attributes blame on others. Number two, the populace reacts by asking the government for protection and help to solve the problem. And point number three, the government offers the solution that was planned by them long before the crisis occurred. So what is the result? Rights and liberties are exchanged for the illusion of protection and help. And so you ask, yeah, I get that, but what does it have to do with Paris and ISIS? Well, it is everything. By using the Hegelian dialectic thinking, the West which is fighting against the antithesis, a problem whom they have created, they are going to get their synthesis, which is nothing else than the construction of the New World Order. That is what they have been planning since the very beginning. And right now we are experiencing it. We are seeing this taking place right before our very eyes through the terrorist attack in Paris. The construction of the Big Brother society, as I have said for so long, is about to finish. The last plans are being laid, and through these barbarous and vicious acts, they want to create their own utopia, which is actually nothing else than mere totalitarianism soaked in so many innocent people's blood and lives. Occultists like Helena Petrovna Blavatsky and Alice Bailey, if you have read their works, they all talk about Ordo ab Chao, order out of chaos. They say in order to create the New World Order, we need to have a lot of bloodshed, but they are determined for it. And for a period of time, unfortunately, they will succeed. So we have seen that the thesis will be rubbed together against the antithesis. And we have seen the documents, and so many people have said that we are the ones who have created this very problem. And they have created the problem in order for your rights and my rights to be taken away. And I'm thinking to myself, and I hope that there are ISIS people who are watching this very clip. If you want to join ISIS, or if you have joined ISIS, I want to tell you, go and leave it. You think that you are waging a holy war. You think that you are doing a holy cause for the purpose of Islam. You are not doing that. The very group that you are joining has been created by the people whom you hate. What does it tell you who has the power? Well, the power is not at you. You have been created by the West. As the documents we have seen, you have been created by the people whom you think you are fighting against, but you have been deceived. You have been so deceived. And put that gun down. Put the ammunition down. Put it all down. Don't join ISIS. You've been brainwashed into thinking that you are doing a holy cause, that you are doing a holy war against the disbelievers. But in matter of fact, you are owned by the disbelievers. Who would have thought that? And I'm not saying this to in any way to be derogative or any such thing. I am just saying that people are being deceived in all of its forms, and there is a war for your mind. People think this is a physical war. It's not. It's a spiritual battle raging not between flesh and blood, but against principalities. So if there are people who you know, or perhaps you want to join ISIS, man, just leave it, man. Just leave it. You may wonder, so what is the good news in the midst of this hopeless situation? Well, the fact is that this has actually been prophesied. The Bible in the book of Revelation chapter 13 and 17 describes what will happen in the near future. That at the end of this world's history, a new world order would come to be about. Church and state would come together to legislate laws that will attack our liberties and take away our freedoms, where we cannot express ourselves. We cannot believe in what we want to believe in. And anybody who will go against this fascist dictatorship will be called all kinds of names. Those who honor the Bible and the Ten Commandments will be denounced as enemies of law and order. You say, why would this be good news? Because I truly believe that these geopolitical events in the world are in the process of fulfilling Bible prophecy. And this means that Jesus is about to return to take us where he is now, so we can leave this sin-sick world and just leave it. I look around and people are nervous, they are anxious, and they are afraid of what is happening. And while I'm definitely not downplaying what these terrorists are doing, don't be afraid of them. That is exactly what they want you to be. They want you to be afraid. They want you to be scared. That is their tactics, to scare you. But I'm not afraid of them. I'm not afraid of anybody. I can clearly see where we are headed. And it is becoming more and more obvious to me. And I'm telling you right now, if you want to fight against the establishment, that is not going to work, because they have gone too far in their plans. Instead, realize prophecy is being fulfilled. Jesus is coming back. Don't be afraid. Make the decision to follow Jesus Christ as your personal Savior and Lord. Look, if we can see that the prophecies are slowly and gradually being in the fulfillment right before our very eyes, and we come to the conclusion that we can trust in it. Do you know in who we can trust in? We can trust the author of the prophecies, and that is none other than Jesus Christ. You can trust in Jesus in this hopeless situation that we are experiencing at the moment. Friends, we are living in exciting times. I want you to understand that. Prophecy is fulfilling, and Christ Jesus is coming back as King of Kings and Lord of Lords soon. Make that decision to follow Jesus before it is too late. We have studied so much, friends, but particularly this Hegelian dialectic thinking, don't forget it. This is all in a plan for them in order to construct that Big Brother society that they want, and they want to do it by making you afraid. Don't be afraid. If you have Christ Jesus in your heart, you're not afraid before anybody. And as I have said, if you are listening to this, remember, you are part of the resistance. God bless.